As you can see, Tom Cleaver's Valley of the Kings is one of AEG's smaller boxed games, comparing it to the size of my hand. It's a deck building game of ancient Egypt. And it is deck building, but it's also more than just deck building. And I'll talk a little bit about that when I get to my verdict on the game. You'll see the back of the box. It's saying, when you die, you can take it with you. So what you're doing here in Valley of the Kings, it's for 2 to 4 players. And each of you is representing a pharaoh of Egypt who's looking to put together as many of the vast array of treasures and so on and so forth that will be buried with them in their tomb. It includes 96 artifact cards, 4 tomb cards, 4 reference cards, and the rule book. So opening it up here, got the rule book itself, and it's a very short rule book. I will point out that I've already played Valley of the Kings, so these cards would have been wrapped up, but I haven't beaten the hell out of the game. so it's giving you an overview, what your goal is. You're looking to score the most victory points, talking about the artifact cards, how to set up the game, the different card levels, an example of the game setup, the pyramid, which I'll get into a bit more when I talk about the gameplay, how to play, buying cards, executing actions, entombing cards, and the end of the game, and how to score. And it gives you an example of how to score, some clarifications for the rules, some card clarifications as well, and then the credits. All in all, about 14 pages of rules. Each player will also get a reference card, so it shows the setup, the end of the game, and taking your turn. So there's 4 of these. Each player will get one. Then we have tomb cards. They're all the same. And then we have the actual cards themselves. Giving you a quick run through. The cards that have the gray border are pretty much your starter cards. As in any deck building game, traditionally you'll have a set deck that you begin with, and these are the cards that are going to make those up. So going through, there are only 4 different starter cards, types of starter cards I should say. So we've got each of these, and then we have the various different artifacts. And you'll notice on each of the cards there's a little bit of flavor text, which is pretty cool, because I believe Tom Cleaver was trying to shoot for being as historically accurate as possible, and it kind of discusses what each of these things would have been back in ancient Egypt. Just kind of flipping through real quickly to show you some of the cards. Now, Valley of the Kings has an MSRP of $19.99, so it is a small footprint box, and it's got a very, very attractive price point to get into play. So that's what's in the box for Valley of the Kings. So let's take a look to see how does the game play. I've set Valley of the Kings up as a 3-player game, and due to the restrictions and limitations as far as the camera angle, I've kind of squeezed everything in a bit. You normally would kind of spread out a little bit more. But as far as the game setup, you're going to have the pyramid. And this is quite a bit different than most traditional deck building games. Even AEG's Nightfall and Thunderstone fall into more of a traditional setup where you'll have a certain number of cards that'll be available to purchase, and those are the only cards that'll be utilized in the game. Dominion, of course, obviously, is a prime example of that. You're going to have so many stacks of cards that can be bought. But in Valley of the Kings, all the cards in the deck, outside of the additional starter cards that each player begins with, will be in play at various different times during the game. So you're not looking at only being able to purchase certain cards during the game. Everybody starts off with their starter deck of cards, and I'll show you that in just a moment. And then they have their tomb card. Then you've got your draw deck or your supply, and then the pyramid of cards, and it's set up with 3 cards down below, 2 above, 1 on top. As far as the cards themselves, I'll kind of break down the anatomy of the card itself. This is the Shabti, or I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, but that is the cost to purchase, so it costs 2 gold to purchase. It has a buying value of 1 gold. The special ability, you can swap 2 cards in the pyramid, or you can sacrifice a card in the pyramid. There's a bit of flavor text, and it also shows that this card is worth 1 victory point if it's entombed in your tomb. That's one of the aspects that's pretty different with Valley of the Kings, is because you're not going to get any points for the cards that you end up having in hand. You only will receive points for cards that you have entombed, what's going to be buried with the Pharaoh. So you walk a really fine line of keeping good cards in your deck that you can utilize and continue to buy more cards and so on and so forth, with entombing cards that you know you'll get the victory points for. As far as the starting deck that everybody gets, there's 4 of the Shabti, there's 3 urns, 2 boxes of food, and 1 offering table. And with most of the traditional deck builders, you've got 10 cards to begin with. You're going to shuffle up and then draw 5 to make up your hand each turn. There are different cards that are available that will allow you more cards in hand. So just as an example, we'll draw 5 cards real quickly here. And early in the game, of course, everyone's going to be looking to be able to purchase more cards to put in their deck. So we've got the 5 cards. We know we've got a value of 5. Now on any turn, each player can buy cards. They can use cards in their hand with the special abilities, and they can entomb one of their cards that they have in hand. So this turn, let's say, well, we've got 5. Everything we see here on the bottom of the pyramid has a value of 4. So 4 of these cards would be used to purchase one of these cards. Interestingly enough, with the pyramid itself, you may only purchase the cards that are in the bottom row. Once you do so, the pyramid crumbles. So as an example, let's just say, okay, we're going to use the 4 cards, and we're going to buy the Wearer's Amulet for a value of 4. It's going to have a purchase availability of 2 gold whenever I have that card in hand. And the special ability is put a card in your hand into an opponent's tomb and draw 3 additional cards. One thing I'm going to point out too with this card here is the level of the card. Your starter cards are all level 1, then we have level 2, and then level 3. The way you make up the deck is you'll take all the level 2 cards, shuffle them up, all the level 3 cards and shuffle them up, put the level 3 down, and then put the level 2 on top to make your supply. So as the game progresses, the better, higher value cards will come out later in the game. The supply and the pyramid also will determine the timing mechanism. The game ends when there's no cards left in supply and the pyramid is empty. At that point in time, you have to make sure that each player will finish up their own turn. So as an example, in a 3-player game, let's say the first player is the person who finishes all the cards. All the cards are now gone. They'll play their turn. Well, in a lot of the deck builders, the game ends, boom, right then and there. For an example, Dominion, once you hit the level of the number of cards that are gone, so many stacks gone, or so many valued cards like estates or whatever, once they're gone, game ends, that's it. Nobody else gets to take a turn. Valley of the Kings, a little bit different. Everyone's going to get their last shot to score as many victory points as they can in that last turn. So let's say I've purchased the amulet. That's going to go on top of my discards. Place it over to the side here. The pyramid crumbles. So in effect, one of these 2 cards here will drop down. It's my choice. So let's say I want the jar to drop down. This card drops here, and then a new card will be drawn to rebuild the pyramid, just like so. Seeing that I add 1 card left, I should have discarded everything right away. I had the 5 cards, I only used 4. I could, if I wanted, although it's only worth 1 victory point, but still this is one way to get rid of some of the bloat of some of the starter cards. I could decide to entomb it, like so. When you entomb the card is no longer in play for your deck, but you're going to get that victory point. Something else to point out as far as the different cards, if they don't show a victory point value, it will show it's part of a set. So this is part of the sarcophagi set. It's indicating there's 3 in the set, which kind of threw us off a little bit because we did notice that a lot of these say like 6 or 7, but there's more than those. I think what this is indicating is it's that many cards of that level. And we kind of had to play around a little bit because it wasn't exactly clear in the rules as far as scoring victory points. And I'll explain why. Because with these sets, you'll take the number of cards you have in a set and multiply it by the number of cards in the set. So you're going to square it. So for an example, if I end up having 2 of the sarcophagi at the end of the game entombed, it would be 2 times 2, so 4 victory points. Or let's say I had 5 of a particular type of card, then I would have 5 cards times 5 for 25 victory points. It kind of got out of hand a little bit because we had, 9 cards of a particular border color. So we were doing 9 times 9. I think what we should have done was based on the level itself. Kind of makes it a little easier to kind of keep the game a little tighter as far as the scoring itself. Now some of the other cards will allow you to entomb cards outside of just the 1 each turn, and so on and so forth. The interesting aspect of Valley of the Kings is you're building the deck, but then in reality you're tearing the deck apart to get those victory points and to store and entomb those sets. So very, very cool little aspect there. So all in all, that's pretty much how you'll play the game. You'll play until all the cards are gone, and then you'll score the victory points for whatever each player has entombed. I like Tom Cleaver's Valley of the Kings. I'm not necessarily the biggest deck building fan out there. Dominion's always left me kind of cold. In fact, just recently I was out in Arizona and I played a game of Dominion with my buddy Louie and his son Little Louie. Hey Louie. And my opinion of Dominion pretty much stayed the same. It's not a bad game, it's just not my cup of tea. It's kind of a little too dry, not enough interaction with the players. With Valley of the Kings, it does share quite a few of the standard conventions of deck building games. You've got your 5 cards, you can use it to buy stuff, you can use the abilities on the cards, and so forth. So if you're familiar with most deck building games, it's going to be very easy to get into. What I think is quite a bit different about Valley of the Kings is the fact that you're going to be entombing cards. Granted, in most deck builders, you're sitting there, you're trying to get rid of that bloat, those garbage cards that you start off with. In Valley of the Kings, your starter cards have a little more value than most deck builders would be. Number one, if you entomb them, you're going to get a victory point for them, and their special abilities can come into play early in the game to help get you cards that you really want. As far as a 4-player game, I think it shines very nicely, even 3 players. With 2 players, it might run a little bit long because you have to keep in mind the timing mechanic of the game is the supply card deck as well as the pyramid. So the game won't end until all those cards are gone. So playing with 4 players or 3 players, you're going to get a lot more out of the experience. Plus, the gameplay time is going to be more in tune with that number of players. People expect 3 and 4 player games to run a little bit longer. I think it's a really cool mechanic as far as getting the cards out of your hand, entombing them. The only thing that counts as far as victory points are those cards that you entomb. So pretty cool little design. For $20, $19.99, honestly, you can't go wrong with Valley of the Kings. If you like deck building games, you're definitely going to want to pick it up. If you're like me and some of those Euro-style deck builders like Dominion leave you a little bit cold, you might get a kick out of Valley of the Kings nonetheless. I'm going to give Valley of the Kings an 8.7 out of 10, so it makes it a solid buy. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure to swing over to thegaminggang.com for all the latest gaming news and reviews and a whole lot more.